So what if I told you that when we think an oil well has run dry, it's actually leaving more than half of its treasure behind? It's true. Today, we're going to dive into the really clever science of enhanced oil recovery, the tech that goes back in to get the rest.
Let's just kick things off with a number that is, honestly, pretty shocking. After all the effort of drilling a well and pumping it, we typically leave about 65% of the oil in the ground. No, that's not a typo. Nearly two-thirds of it is just still down there.
That just begs the obvious question, right? Why is that oil so stubborn? And maybe more importantly, what can we actually do to get it out? Well, that's exactly what we're going to break down.
To really appreciate the solution, you first have to get a handle on the problem. And it all starts with the physical limits of our usual methods.
Okay, so think of an oil well's life in a couple of acts. Act 1 is primary recovery. This is where the natural pressure underground just pushes oil right up to the surface. Easy enough. But when that pressure fades, we move to Act 2, secondary recovery. This is where we pump water down to force more oil up. But here's the catch. Even after all that, a massive amount of oil is still stuck in the tiny little pores of the rock, kind of like water trapped in a sponge.
And that right there brings us to the third act in an oil well's life. This is the part that requires a much more advanced toolkit, and this is what we call enhanced oil recovery, or EOR for short. So what is EOR exactly? Well, in a nutshell, it's a whole suite of high-tech methods designed specifically to go after that stubborn, trapped oil. It's really the difference between just giving up on a well and unlocking its absolute full potential.
At its heart, the strategy behind every EOR method is surprisingly simple. You either change the oil itself to make it flow better, or you change the way the oil is clinging to the rock around it. That's the whole game. Just get that oil moving again.
So how in the world do we actually do that? Well, it turns out there are three main families of techniques, three different ways to coax that oil out of the ground.
We can actually break down the entire EOR toolkit into three really simple ideas. You can think of it as heating the oil up, pushing it out with gas, or literally washing it out with chemicals. Let's take a quick look at how each one works.
All right, first up is the thermal method. This is perfect for heavy, thick oil. You inject steam deep into the reservoir, which heats up the oil and dramatically lowers its viscosity, its thickness. It's just like warming up cold honey. Suddenly, the oil gets thin and flows way more easily toward the production wells. Next, we've got the gas method. For this, gases like carbon dioxide are injected into the reservoir. This does a couple of key things. First, it repressurizes the whole formation, acting like a giant plunger pushing the oil out. But it also does something else cool. The gas can dissolve into the oil, making it less thick and easier to move. Kind of like how the fizz in a soda can help push out the last few drops. And finally, there's the chemical method. And this one is exactly like using soap to clean a greasy pan. We inject special chemicals, things called surfactants or polymers. These chemicals actually reduce the surface tension between the oil and the rock, basically scrubbing the oil droplets free so they can get swept toward the well. So let's just do a quick recap. You've got the thermal method using steam to heat things up, you've got the gas method using gases like CO2 to push it along, and you've got the chemical method using polymers to basically scrub it clean from the rock. Each one is a pretty clever solution for a very specific problem down there.
Okay, so we've got all this amazing technology, but why does it matter so much? This is where we get into the real-world impact of all this science.
This quote really nails it. EOR isn't just some neat trick. It's a core strategy for getting the absolute most out of the resources we've already found. It breathes new life into old fields, keeping them productive for years, sometimes even decades, longer than they otherwise would be. And, just look at the difference it makes. With the usual methods, we might get around 35% of the oil. But by bringing in EOR technologies, we can push that recovery number all the way up to 60%, maybe even more. We're talking about nearly doubling the output from the very same resource. It's huge.
So what's the bottom line? Well, EOR can boost a field's total output by an extra 10 to 30%. That is a gigantic amount of energy that without this tech would just be left in the ground forever.
So the benefits are really clear. You make existing fields last longer, you boost their performance, and you squeeze more economic value out of the infrastructure that's already there. It really is all about working smarter and using our resources more efficiently. All right, let's zoom out for a second and see how this all fits into the bigger energy conversation.
Here's the key strategic play. Every single barrel of oil we get through EOR from a field we already have
is a barrel we don't have to go searching for in some new, often more challenging and expensive part of the world. It's about being smart with what we've got.
Now, of course, this level of sophistication doesn't just happen. EOR is a serious investment. It requires specialized infrastructure, pipelines for steam, wells for CO2, plus constant monitoring and really rigorous safety management to make sure it's all done the right way.
When you get right down to it, enhanced oil recovery is a story about innovation and just being more efficient. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes our most valuable energy resources aren't in brand new discoveries, but in figuring out how to better use what we've already found. It proves that maximizing existing resources is a critical piece of the energy puzzle. Which, of course, leaves us with a final question to think about. What's the other piece? Thanks for watching.